Taking notes in class is just as productive as it is distracting, and if not done properly, at the end of the lecture, you could have a comprehensive note, but you have not actually learned anything. Why do we really take down notes in class? Most of the time it's because we just feel afraid that we're going to forget the multitude of information that we are receiving at a time in a lecture. Other times it's just so we can feel productive. Sometimes it's even out of peer pressure. You see your friends writing down something, and so you just feel like, oh, I have to write something down too. Now, there are some facts about taking down notes in class that I think you need to know about. It will shock you. Through thorough online research and even from my personal experience, I've been able to find out that taking notes, especially word for word notes, you know that kind of notes that are taken like you are the secretary of your lecturer, making you physically engaged but cognitively absent. This means that you're too busy writing to actually be learning. And at the end of the day, you discover that although you have a lot of notes, but you've not really absorbed so much. The same thing also happens to when we are reading. Sometimes when we are reading and we are taking notes. Taking the notes is just a lazy way of receiving the information, so we don't have to do the real work of putting that information in our brain. You get the point. This whole thing brings us to what we call the cognitive load theory. This concept in psychology was developed by John Sweller. It simply talks about the amount of information that the working memory of the brain can take at a time. And according to John Sweller, this working memory has limited capacity. This means that during the process of learning, if you take up any additional activity, you are just interrupting your process of learning. These additional activities are like writing or talking or listening to music. These things are interrupting the process of learning, and your process of learning can never be 100%. If you want to truly learn, you have to drop any other activity at that point and try to concentrate on just absorbing the information cognitively. Now, the question you probably have in your mind right now is taking notes in a class now a bad thing? No, it's actually not a bad thing. You just have to do it in the right way and also in the right time. I don't like this cap. In this video, I'll try to share the way I take my notes that I feel allows me to be present enough while I still have a note to fall back to. There are 4 main things that I include in my notes. They include the subtopic, so some bullets to explain each subtopic. Then we could also have diagrams or flowcharts if the concept you're talking about is abstract and I need something visual to look at. And lastly, we have mind map. Now, just before I even get started with the notes, I first of all write a clear and bold topic that describes what the entire note is all about, so that when I'm coming back to read it, I know what it is I want to read about. Under the topic, there are subtopics. Like if you're having a class on gastrointestinal tract system, you know there are so many things to talk about under that system, like the esophagus, the stomach, small intestine, the large intestine. These can serve as subtopics. The bullets under these subtopics will just be summarizing certain important explanation that I learned during the lecture. Writing it as short and brief as possible so that I have enough time to go back to listening to the lecture. I leave space for diagrams during the lecture because I know trying to draw diagrams can take so much time, and so except of course there's time during the lecture to do that without actually interrupting with the learning process. Then I also mentioned flowcharts. If you're learning something abstract, something that does not really have a diagram, maybe it's not anatomy, it's not physiology, it's not something physical, then you may need a flowchart if you're kind of type of like me that likes to see things, connect to one another and see how one thing leads to another. Now, if you don't like this entire method I share about taking notes, maybe you feel maybe it's too specific, it's too structured, there's a lazy man method that I call a lazy man method because it's for lazy people. It's all about taking notes on the slides itself. So what it means is that you're able to take notes on the slides while you're receiving the lecture. I think this is by far the most easy and stress-free way of taking notes. So when you are going through the slides, you can see all the important explanation that the lecturer said or gave during that lecture, during the time he was at that slide. So you can very much relate or even relieve the lecture while you are reading that slide again. It's very effective. I love the entire process. I use him most of the time too because take notes from scratch can be very serious. You have to write stuff in the slide as well as stuff that the lecturer is saying all together. So but if you already have the slides down, you can just add the explanation only to it and you can return back to listening. But not much Nigerian universities or lecturers release their slides before the lecture. In fact, after the lecture itself, they may not release it. So it depends on the settings that you are in or the kind of lecturer that you have. If you have such, maybe you can try that method. Otherwise, you might want to check out the method I mentioned earlier before that. That wraps it up for this video. I hope you find it informative. I didn't talk too much. The little I said, I hope it was helpful. But don't go yet. There's a video on the screen that you should check out. It talks about how to read for a long period of time. Get a few tips from there as well.